time is running out for the murderous regime that we know as Hamas. After slaughtering over 1,200 innocent civilians, killing entire families, sexually assaulting women and worse, and then kidnapping many others, Israel declared war on these monsters, and over a year later, after intense fighting, Hamas has had their teeth kicked in. Thousands of soldiers dead and even more civilians wiped out, and the entire Gaza Strip is now nothing more but a smoking ruin. Hamas, although hit hard, is by no means eliminated, however. And now a ceasefire deal was made. After pressure from both the Biden regime and Trump, prisoners were to be exchanged. Except Hamas has been slow-walking the process, and Donald Trump, it seems, has finally had enough. The final straw came in the release of 3 visibly emaciated Israeli hostages on Saturday. This seems to have been a turning point for President Donald Trump, who is expressing concern about the condition of the hostages, saying, based on what I saw over the past 2 days, they're not going to be alive for long, meaning other prisoners. This suggests that the poor health of the released hostages has heightened the urgency for Trump around this situation.
Well, I would say this, and I'm going to let that be because that's Israel's decision, but as far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out. And I don't think they're going to do it. I think a lot of them are dead. I think a lot of the hostages are dead. This is a different group of people. No, I would say Saturday at 12, we want them all back. I'm speaking for myself. Israel can override it. But from myself, Saturday at 12 o'clock, and if they're not here, all hell is going to break out. You'll find out, and they'll find out too. Hamas will find out what I mean.
Now, while the rest of the world might complain and moan, here's the thing. Israel doesn't really give a rat's rear end what the rest of the world has to say about them. The European Union has notoriously been anti-Israel in every Palestinian conflict that they've been involved in since the 1990s, and the UN? Pretty much the same thing. The only allies that they'll really listen to, who have been their lifelong friend and strategic partner, is the United States. And now that Trump is effectively signaling to them that, hey, if they don't honor the agreement, the gloves can come off, then this is something that the Palestinians should be greatly worried about. This is just me talking here, but I suspect that Israel has been holding back this whole time. Despite all the wild cries and moans from Hamas apologists around the world, there in fact has not yet been a so-called genocide. Yes, a lot of casualties have been inflicted in this war, but it's a war. Israel has had the military power to inflict far greater casualties on the Gazan people, and catastrophic damage to the territory could have been infinitely worse. Those civilian deaths are tragic. Again, this is war. Soldiers are meant for one thing, or two things really, killing and breaking things. And though the fighting has been rough, yes, compared to historical wars, these tens of thousands dead in over a year of fighting are impossibly low numbers compared to real wars that have been waged in the not too distant past. Let's give it some context here. Let's take a real war, meant for winning at all costs. Let's go back in time to World War II. In that war, the rate of deaths that transpired was staggering. There were approximately 1,330 people that died every hour on average throughout the entire war. This translates to about 22 deaths per minute, or 1 life lost every 3 seconds, consistently for the entire duration. To put this into perspective, yearly deaths during World War II, 12 million people. Monthly deaths, 972,000. Daily deaths, over 32,000. And if we want to talk about true genocide, the genocide archetype is the Holocaust, where over 6 million Jews were murdered. Not during a war, mind you, but after their territory was conquered and the fighting ended. That is when the true horror began. And to give you context between Gaza and Israel and the Holocaust, to give you a percentage difference in actual casualties from a real genocide versus the Israel-Hamas war, there were over 13,000 more Jewish people killed from the Holocaust than the war in Gaza. Now again, don't get me wrong. Civilian deaths are always tragic. However, when you start a war by slaughtering innocent civilians and then have mass public celebrations of the slaughtering of said innocents, like these, well, my level of sympathy is bound to drop below zero. We saw after the mass murder of Jewish people, Palestinians in Gaza and several West Bank cities all participated in public celebrations shortly after the attack. In Gaza, Nablus, and Jenin, and Bethlehem, people took to the streets in jubilation. They were happy that there were murders and rapes and killings of Jewish innocent civilians. We saw all of this in videos from Al Jazeera Network. It was public for the world to see. In Ramallah, spontaneous rallies occurred with people chanting slogans supporting Hamas. And in Nablus, sweets were handed out in the streets. In Jenin, members of the Jenin Brigade fired guns in celebration, and so on and so forth. So, when you mass murder people and start a war with, I believe, a clear intention of drawing in the other surrounding Arab nations to help them annihilate Israel, which didn't happen because America was still there and nobody really wanted to challenge the USA at that point, even with Joe Biden in command. And when you, as an institution, Hamas, completely fail in your war with Israel and end up getting your ass handed to you, well, you lose the right to come to the rest of the world and then cry about, oh no, civilian deaths in a war that we started. Oh, so terrible. You can't complain about how Israel is so mean to you. Oh, golly gosh, gee willikers. The whole thing is stupid and absurd. And yet, this has happened, by the way, time and time again. For over 30 years, Hamas has been repeating this cycle of death and destruction. And so this brings us back to Trump and his plan to put an end to this ridiculous nightmare. Donald Trump is doubling and tripling down on his suggestion, which I believe is actually more than a suggestion, of moving the Palestinians somewhere else where they can finally live in peace.
There are a lot of hotspots around the world. I want to hit a few quickly. Okay. With Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, you said this.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it.
That caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, some positive.
Some positive, but even some of your supporters wondered whether that meant U.S. troops were going to have to be going into a dangerous Middle East conflict.
No troops.
So where is it today?
I've been watching 50 years, 60 years. They go in, they occupy, they get slaughtered, everything's terrible, everyone leaves, they go back. This has been going on for forever, right? We move them into beautiful areas of the Middle East. I'd like to go to Egypt. They have a lot of land. I'd like to go to Jordan. I'd like to go to others. And we'll build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could ever, it's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. You know, we give them billions and billions of dollars a year. A lot of people thought it was a great idea. Really, a lot of people. And I'm not talking about big money for I just think it will be stabilized if the United States owns the Gaza Strip. If people aren't living in the Gaza Strip and Hamas isn't there because nobody's there, people aren't there, I would like to get some land from these others. We'll get Saudi Arabia, we'll get some of the great people. We have incredible people in the Middle East. We'll get these people to finance it. It's not a lot of money. You're talking about building 1.8 million houses. That's not a lot of people.
As Fox News reported, Jordan's King Abdullah II, who has repeatedly pushed back against the idea of relocating Palestinians to Hashemite Kingdom, is expected to discuss the proposal Tuesday, where he meets with the president at the White House. And Egypt has announced over the weekend that it will host an emergency Arab summit in Cairo at the end of the month to address the, quote, new and dangerous developments in the Palestinian issue. See, I think that despite what many people believe, Donald Trump is deadly serious about this. This isn't just him posturing. I think he's actually going to push for this to happen. And I think it's probably going to get done. You watch. He's got 4 years, and all these Arab countries are not going to be wanting to deal with Donald Trump this entire time and all the fallout of getting in his way. They've seen what's happened in South America. All of these things that he's doing has a purpose and a reason, despite what people think. And so he's putting this stuff out into the ether and letting them know, hey, if you get in our way, we're going to come kick your butt. He's begun putting out the ramifications out into the ether. I want to pull up an article from the UK Daily Mail. This was yesterday. This was an article titled, Trump threatens to cut off aid to Jordan and Egypt if the countries don't take Palestine. He's begun letting this threat out into the ether. Take a look at this. This is from the UK Daily Mail.
Are you going to talk to Zelensky this week?
President, back on Gaza, you talked with Fox News about the billions of dollars we pay for Jordan and Egypt every year. Would you withhold aid to these countries if they don't agree to take in the Palestinians?
Yeah, maybe. Sure. Why not? You mean
Is
if
that
they
part
don't
of the deal that
agree?
you mentioned?
If they don't agree, I would conceivably withhold aid. Yeah.
And that's just one tool in his toolbox. These people need our money. For all the blustering and complaining, there's a good chance he's going to get his way. Let me slide on down to this part of the article within the UK Daily Mail. Now, the UK Daily Mail goes on to write that on Monday, Trump was asked to clarify comments he made that suggested the Palestinians wouldn't be able to return to their homeland once it was given a makeover. And he said, we've spoken to a lot of Palestinians. They would love to leave Gaza if they could find a place to be. And I've spoken to various leaders of various countries, the not so distant area from where we're talking about, the Gaza Strip. And I think they are very positive about providing land. And if we could build a nice place for people to live safely, everybody in Gaza would do it. They have been persecuted. They've been spit on. They've been treated like trash. And they would love to get out of Gaza. But until now, they've never had an alternative. And the president was insistent. They are all going to leave. Now, the reality is this. Part of the reason why people from Gaza won't leave is that Hamas would kill them if they tried. So if you remove Hamas from the situation, a large percentage of the Gazan people themselves would likely gladly leave on their own. There is no future in the Gaza Strip. It has become a cult of death. For decades now, the rest of the Arab world has used the Palestinian people as their useful idiots, their tools to attack Israel indirectly. Time and time again, Palestinian people have been the fall guys in the other Arab nations' quest to destroy Israel. I've gone into great detail about this in a previous episode on this channel as the emergence of Hamas suicide bombings began back in Israel as far back as 1990. And the group has not ceased in their attempts at killing Israelis and provoking conflicts with the country for the past 3 decades. But if you want to see the overview of the Israeli conflict, I'll link the other video in the description. Suffice it to say, though, returning to the status quo is a dead end for both Israel and the people of Palestine, for the Gaza Strip. It will only be a matter of time before we repeat the same stupid, absurd story, and it begins all over again. This is why I believe that Donald Trump will take matters into his own hands. All I'm saying is, don't dismiss what Donald Trump is proposing. When all is said and done, I believe he is going to get his way here, which then takes me back to the current threat of a resumption of violence against Hamas. This will only serve to further the aims of President Trump. If Israel goes back to destroying Hamas, and once more, the people of Gaza and the Gaza Strip are forced to retreat to the edge of their territory, and so in the end, perhaps, maybe, just maybe, after all is said and done, there might yet be a bright future for the poor bastards of Palestine and the Gaza Strip. Maybe they can live somewhere with no Israeli neighbor to hate, somewhere with a future of hope on the horizon. But again, only time will tell.